Hey everyone, it's Carey, and I am on the road. It's 8:15, and I am heading down to Baton Rouge. I've been in the car for about 5.5 hours, and I'm heading to Baton Rouge because I'm speaking tomorrow to a group of about 60 bankers, and this will be primarily Bank Secrecy Act officers, BSA officers, and and so I'm excited to speak to this group. I spoke last in Little Rock, Arkansas. And this week I will be in Baton Rouge and then Monroe, Louisiana on Wednesday, and Little Rock on Thursday, and back to Baton Rouge on Friday. So in total, I'll see almost 200 bankers, and many of these bankers are going to be under $1 billion in assets. And there's a misconception out there among many in the community bank among community bankers that really to be compliant with the new CDD rule, all it requires is for you to get verification from your customer that what they have told you is in fact accurate, and you can get a signature for that. While that is true for those customers who are not high risk, that will not work for customers who are deemed high risk. So let's back up and peel back to really the core of what the new CDD rule is driving towards. The new CDD rule really wants banks to perform a risk assessment and perform that risk assessment on their customers. And through that risk assessment, they want banks to establish what customers are higher risk, and for those higher risk customers, they want you to establish an enhanced due diligence program. Now, we've built enhanced due diligence programs for customers, and it is not easy. Um, and so the first step is to do a risk assessment based on the products and services and the customer types that you have. The second is based on that risk assessment, you have to deem customers that are high risk. Well, I often get, well, we don't have any high risk customers. Well, I would say, okay, does that mean that every customer is the same level of risk? And of course, you get no. Okay, well, if not everybody is the same level of risk, that means some are lower risk, and certainly you get confirmation of, yes, some are lower risk than others. Well, by default, that means some are more high risk. I think it's important to absolutely look at your customer type and take a fresh look at this, because based on the perspective, the fresh perspective that this new risk assessment is going to allow you, you get the opportunity to create policies and procedures and processes for how to mitigate the risk that you have deemed uh, uh, through your risk assessment. While many think that this is it's not overly it's not going to be that big of a deal, I would argue that the first thing that you need to do is extract a population, determine what the population is that your total customer population, and then I would do a sample size. Based on your sample size, look at the customers that maybe conduct transactions where you feel like you don't have enough of the information that's required, and that you would have to go get additional information. And this is going to kind of get you into the mindset of a new cycle time for how long it takes to get new information. I've been told by regulators that while the May 18th is a go-forward approach, the expectation is that you will have absolutely done a look back for all of your customers that are high risk. So this gets into a little bit of a sensitive area. You as a bank, you have to set policies. Your board is going to set policies that you believe address the concerns of the new CDD rule. And then based on that, management needs to come up with detailed procedures. Think of it as a how-to guide for how to implement these new these how-to guides for how to implement the policies. And then lastly, to provide context, you want to look at the functional areas of the business. You want to look at we call that a process. So break that into specific processes, and how do these processes, how does the work with specific processes utilize the procedures that have been established to enforce the policy? In preparing for this, I pulled a couple of examples from the IRS. I've actually pulled about 45 pages of examples from the last 2.5 years. And it's pretty interesting. If you look at the IRS money laundering cases, what you find are examples of a small town pharmacist who was selling OxyContin and was making deposits under $10,000 to not raise any red flags. What you'll find is used cars dealers that were in cahoots with a drug smuggler, and they were titling the vehicle in a name that was different from the person that was paying partially cash for the vehicle. What you'll find is real estate. You'll find small-time Ponzi schemes, and so I'll ask banks tomorrow if if you believe that your relationships with your customers are just too small and it's just not that big of a concern, I'll ask, are there any pharmacists in your town? And I'll ask, are there any used car dealers in your town? And I'll ask, do you believe that your town is the only town where there's not a drug problem, someone buying drugs? Someone somewhere has these problems. They all have these problems. And the only way to really, really listen, I'm not suggesting that that banks have to absolutely, know at a granular level every single, pharmacist that may be, smuggling OxyContin. That's an impossible task for community banks. But it is critical that you have a sound program to mitigate the risk. So how do you get a sound program? Well, what you can't rely on is the binder that was drafted, um, 10 years ago, and and the procedures and the processes that really don't get looked at that often because you got a pass from the regulator. You have to create absolute alignment with the FFIEC manual. At the end of the day, that is the only saving grace for you to be able to say to a regulator, we understand that this transaction may have happened at our bank. These are the policies, procedures, and processes that we have, and every single step aligns with what you said, and we are making our best effort. That at least gives you a position of defense, because there's no doubt that the IRS, once they identify these illegal activities, let's take the pharmacist for example. I am certain that the IRS is probably looked into, where did that pharmacist bank? And I am certain that at some point a regulator is going to get notified and tie the two together. And so that's a problem that we all need to be aware of, and we all need to be just clued into. So that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. I'll let you know how it goes, and I'll keep you posted. Thanks for listening.